All right, so what did everyone think of episode 3, called Why Did the Mainlanders Cross the River? I thought it was really, really interesting. We finally got some insight into Herschel and his interactions with the Dama and what happened when she had him before Maggie rescued him in season 1. So let's just dive in. We got a bunch of flashbacks, and it starts that way with him as a captive, and he's tied to a chair and left there, which is pretty horrific. But the Dama comes in to see him, and she says she's sorry he was treated that way. You know, none of it has anything to do with him. And she offers him some food, some candy that's like peanut brittle. Asks if he needs anything else, unties him, right? And he wants a coat, so she gives him hers. And then he asks for a paper and drawing utensils. Right away you can see that she's manipulating him a little bit, trying to be his friend and the person who rescued him, and getting him to trust her. So then it jumps back to current day. Now, this is something that I did not pick up on in the last episode, episode 2, but W.D. Wade did. I noticed that, if you remember in that episode, somebody was signaling the Croat. They had started the tires on fire and burning, and there was a white. It looked almost like a handkerchief or something, but it actually was probably a bandage. And I wasn't sure what the point of that was. I mean, the camera focused on it for a minute, but then it wasn't really addressed. And then at the end of the episode, Herschel was wrapping up somebody's leg. And I was talking about how he's got a lot of Beth in him, and he's helping to, administer medical treatment to people, which is a lot like Grady. And that Maggie looked really, really shocked at that point, and I wasn't sure why. Well, here's why. Like I said, I didn't quite put everything together, but W.D. Wade did. The bandage that Herschel was using to wrap up that woman's leg was the same bandage. I mean, not the exact same one, but the same kind of bandage that was used to start the fire. So the idea is that Herschel is the one who started the fire and signaled to the Croat. And after this episode, it's pretty clear it's not so much the Croat he's signaling, it's the Dama. But either way, he's the one who is signaling. And so he's actually working against Maggie and working against Maggie's group. And so this is why we're getting these flashbacks in this episode, so that we can see why he's doing that, right? So as we start in, current day with Maggie, she's still keeps looking at this leg bandage. You can tell she's trying to figure it out. She's turning everything over in her head. She and the Colonel talk a little bit. She, is trying to tell him that they need to go home. And, as always, he's not really paying attention. They hear some monkeys. He says there used to be a zoo in the park. Then a walker, comes out from the brush and attacks someone and kills a woman. And this walker is really interesting. First of all, it's only got one eye, or at least the other eye is covered. So it's a one-eye walker, which is very much like a serious dog star kind of walker. And the walker's heart seems to be gone. So we've seen this before in different iterations, the idea of the heart not being there. The first time we saw it was in Tales of the Walking Dead in Terry Crews's episode, and it looked a little bit different there. In that case, there was like a hole directly through the walker where the heart should have been, like you could see through to the other side. This was not that way, okay? The heart had been cut out, but not all the way through. So like there wasn't a wound in the back, that sort of thing, but still, this is a theme to have the heart missing. So I thought that was really interesting. Then we cut to Negan and the Croat in a car. The Croat is telling his men to establish a perimeter and search the park, like they know that Maggie and her team went into the park. But of course, Central Park is a huge place, and probably even worse in this world, in this timeline, because it's all overgrown and everything, right? And the Croat says he understands why Negan couldn't kill a child, and that even back when they were at the sanctuary, that was crossing a line for them. And then he says, if we encounter this kid again, I'll make sure you don't have to kill him, And the other guy, what is his name? Waylon, big, tall guy. They both kind of laugh about it, which Negan obviously is not liking. It's very disturbing to him, and he doesn't want Herschel to die. He doesn't want these guys to find Herschel and kill him. So then we go back to Maggie. Marshall says they're on the west side near 70th Street. I thought the 70 was kind of interesting, just in terms of numerology. 7's an important number. It's a biblical number. So they let's see, what is this lady's name? Nevaeh's. Her and the Colonel talk, and she wants to go for the methane. And this is not what they discussed. Even, you remember when Maggie agreed to come along, this was supposed to be an exploratory mission. And from the beginning, it was obvious that it wasn't quite what they told her it was going to be. And now they're kind of not even pretending anymore. They're saying we need to go for the methane because we're here now and people have died, and we just need to go get some of it and end it right now. And the Colonel agrees, which, of course, Maggie does not like, and they argue again. But he says that he's on her side and they'll do it her way, and he'll listen to her, but he still does want to go for the methane. And he also tells her, if you decide to desert and leave with your kid, then your community is going to be in danger. I'm blanking on what their organization is called, like the Federation or whatever it is of communities will go kill a bunch of people if she deserts. So Maggie's really stuck here. She doesn't want to get people hurt, but she doesn't agree with what they're doing, and they're walking into something that's very, very dangerous. They head for a boathouse, so there's a boat reference there that he knows where that is, but they have to cross a field with very high grass, and naturally walkers emerge. Maggie and Herschel get separated. Oh, I forgot to say that earlier when they were, first walking through the park and before they hit this grass field, somebody was watching. We see somebody watching Herschel, a woman. So in this part, Maggie and Herschel get separated in the grass. A lot of people die because of the walkers. And Ginny drops her bag and Herschel picks it up, so he now has Ginny's bag. And remember that there was a gun in that bag that Ginny was kind of hiding. The girl who was watching him earlier saves him. There's some walkers about to get him, and she helps him and saves him, but then she disappears into the grass again. So he doesn't learn who she is. Then we see the Croat and Negan sitting at a table in the middle of the street eating bread and pheasant pate and wine. I didn't look too much into, what they're eating here. I do think it's all symbolic. Of course, because there's a table and they're eating and there's alcohol involved, it immediately makes me think of Alone and Beth and Daryl and alcohol and all of that. I'm not sure how much that applies here, given that, this clearly is not a romantic scene or anything. But I think it is interesting that there's wine there, and there's probably some symbolism behind the pheasant pate. And there's a lot of bread there. And the bread actually, I think, may be a Christian symbol. The idea of breaking bread, the Last Supper. We already know that later on, possibly next episode, but I'm not for sure what episode it'll be in, we are going to get a representation of the Last Supper. And so the bread, to me, kind of stuck out as a Christian symbol. So, like I said, I didn't have hardly any time this weekend, and it was hard for me to even get this episode watched and even do this much analysis, so I didn't look into this terribly deeply. If somebody else wants to, go for it and let us know what you find. But I do think that there's symbolism in this scene, and especially because it's kind of random that they got out of their car, they set up this little table in the middle of the street to have a meal. And not that there's anything wrong if you can with sitting down at a table to eat, but they very easily could have had the same dialogue and done the same scene with them sitting in the car. So it's very intentional that they got them out of the car, found a little round table, put bread and wine on it, almost like a little bit like a Last Supper, but I guess you could also say it's maybe a little bit sacramental. So yeah, I do think there's symbolism going on there, but again, I didn't look at it too deeply. So at this point, the Croat says, he's talking about the Dama, and he says after he crashed in Manhattan, he woke up on a sofa with a blanket and a plate of brittle candy. So he's trying to say that, Negan's asking why, he asks why the Dama treats him, the Croat, like her redheaded stepchild. And the Croat's just explaining that she saved him and made him trust her. And he says, I know she's horrible sometimes, I know she's brutal, but there are times that she's not, as a way of explaining why he's loyal to her. But here's the thing, guys, about this, and this may be my biggest takeaway from this episode. It wasn't until this scene where the Croat says he woke up and she had given him brittle candy. It's more than likely the same candy that she gave Herschel when he woke up. It's just something that she has the resources to make, and it's sweet, it's candy, it's kind of a treat, not something that everybody has access to, and I'm sure it tastes really good. And she gives this to people to endear herself to them. But once the Croat said this and that she had done this with him too, I got really, really strong Chronicles of Narnia vibes. I think that's a little bit of a template here with the Dama being the White Witch, and in place of this brittle candy that Dama is using would be the Turkish Delight. Think about Herschel as being Edmund, right? He meets her, she sweet talks him, she gets him to trust her and like her. She gives him this little delicacy that most people don't have that's really good. And now he's working against his family members and the group that he's with. He's become kind of a turncoat. And that's exactly what happened with Edmund in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So that was a big one for me. I'm getting really, really strong White Witch, Edmund, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe vibes here. Maggie finally, they all got separated in the grass. She finally makes it to the boathouse, and most of the others, like the Colonel and Nevaez and some of the others follow. But Herschel doesn't get there yet. He doesn't arrive. And Maggie wants to go look for him, of course, but there's a lot of walkers coming at them that she can't get through. So they go to a place called Cafe on the Lake, which is a building where there's a little community inside. There's people living in there. There's a lot of symbolism going on in the scene. And again, I don't have time to go into all of it or, research all of it. But there was a teapot. We've seen that before. It was like a golden teapot that she poured water from. She's actually pretty cool to them, right? She says they can stay for now. Eventually she'll make them leave. But she wants her community to stay secret and for people not to know that they're there. She also sends people out to look for Herschel. And the Colonel talks to this woman who's their leader. I'm not sure if we ever learn her name. I didn't write it down. But he offers to let her people join their, federation of communities. But she doesn't want to. She says they're fine, they're self-sufficient, they're not interested, and she likes where they are. And he offers to have somebody go through and sweep the field and take out all the dead, but she doesn't want that. She likes the dead there to protect them. And I just thought that was really interesting. I mean, we've certainly seen this theme before of using walkers as a protection. And I don't know, I think it's something that I think about a lot in my headcanon, so I always like it when they do this, and I think it's just a really interesting thing. In a way, it's just really practical. I mean, in some ways, of course, it's morbid, but in this world where this is going on, and you have to be protected from others who might be trying to hurt you or steal your food or whatever the case is, it makes sense to use walkers as a protection. So I always think it's interesting when they do this. Maggie does decide to leave and go find Herschel again, and she tells the Colonel not to push anything on this community, like leave them alone, don't try to force them to give up their home or be part of us or anything like that. Like, you need to respect their wishes. And, I think we all know that chances are that's not going to happen, unfortunately. So we see Herschel climb over a fence, and he comes next to a dry fountain, which also could be a symbol. I mean, it's a water symbol, right? But it's run dry. I also noticed a tattered, yellow and red umbrella top. So it's like one of those umbrellas that sticks out of a table to produce shade. And it looked a lot like the carousel symbol that we see a lot in the show. Especially, we see it around Rick and Michonne a lot. And it just reminded me of that a little bit. Of course, yellow being a Beth color. Anyway, Herschel looks through Ginny's bag. He does find the gun, but he also finds a pencil, and he starts trying to draw a map on the back of the piece of paper that he has. And we get another flashback here. This is when he's with the Dama. He's drawing, and she asks why he drew that particular angle of the city. And he just says it's something he saw from the car. And once again, we get this theme where he says he likes it better that it's all broken down and overgrown. Because she asks him, why didn't you draw it fixed up and cleaned up rather than as it is? And he says, I like it this way, it's better. And we have heard him say that before. I think it's really, really interesting. So then she talks about a guy named Dmitri Allstat, who was a sculptor from 1903. She says he only knew rage and pain and expressed it in his art. She mentions Negan. So she's the Dama is very good at this. She's very good at reading people, and she's very good at, empathizing with them and saying the right thing so she can connect with them. So just by observing Herschel as much as she has. She can see he's artistic. We know that she's something of a patron of the arts, so this is pretty easy for her to dip into her knowledge and find something that will work, that she can connect with him on. But she can see, and from what he said, she immediately makes all kinds of connections and realizes that Herschel is using his art to express his pain. And he actually prefers art that is, maybe a little bit dreary or dark or gothic, because that's how he's feeling. And, you got to understand that if it was the opposite, if Herschel was drawing something that was happy and sunny, she would have talked to him about an artist that drew or sculpted happy and sunny things. She's using what she's seeing from him and his cues to connect with him and giving him information and making it seem like they are kindred spirits and they are simpatico, And like I said, the Dama's really good at this. She can do it very quickly, very easily. She's kind of a chameleon, but she just reads people and their body language and the meaning, like the psychological meaning behind what they say, very, very well. This is why she's the leader. She's very good at manipulating people, okay? So I just thought this whole thing was really interesting when it comes to understanding the Dama as a villain. She does mention Negan and finds out that he doesn't care about Negan. He's actually pretty bitter about how much his mom is obsessed with Negan. And, that's probably not something we would want the Dama to know. She's definitely going to exploit that. But, of course, Herschel doesn't take that into account. And then we basically see her start poisoning him against Maggie. So she's saying things like, well, I can see that you're in pain, that no one has ever been there for you. The person that should love and care for you the most isn't there for you. You know what I mean? She's making him feel more darkness and more anger around Maggie. And then she says, you don't have to pretend with me. I see you. And you know what I mean? So again, it's just more manipulation, getting him to trust her, getting him to like her. And it's unfortunate because Herschel really isn't getting a whole lot of nurturing from Maggie, so it's very easy for the Dama to get his affections this way. And then when she leaves his door open. So it's like he's not a prisoner and she trusts him, which, I think we all know that's not true. This is totally a setup, but of course Herschel doesn't know that. So then we go back to Herschel in the park. He's still drawing and it just sort of leaves him there at that point. I think I didn't actually say that Negan, when he was talking to the Croat at the table, offered to go into the park and basically kill Maggie's group. He just said, if there's any more of them alive, I think the dead might have taken them out, but if I find them, I'll finish them off. And of course, we know he's not really going to do that. Well, the Croat, unfortunately, is not as much of an idiot as we would like him to be, and so he sends Waylon, the big guy, in with Negan. So this is where we come to Negan and Waylon, and they find the first woman who was killed in the park from Maggie's group. So they know that they're on the right trail and they're tracking them. This is where we get the title for the episode. Waylon, he's just all about how he thinks Negan is a Mainlander, and I mean, obviously, but I think I was trying to remember who the Dama's people think he is, and I don't know. I don't think it really matters whether he's a Mainlander or not, or what they think he is. I think the idea is that Waylon is hinting that he thinks Negan is part of Maggie's group. Like, Waylon clearly does not trust him. And Negan makes the joke, why did the Mainlanders cross the river? And when Waylon said why, he said they didn't. And I think this was just a way for Negan to bring up that he helped, quote unquote, kill them and sink their boat, and they didn't actually make it across like they wanted to. So he's trying to dispel doubts that Waylon is having about him. Now, I don't think it's working, but it's like this psychological banter, right? So then they go into a dark tunnel passage. This is really interesting. Again, I could probably do a lot more analysis of this on a symbolic level. The dark tunnel is something that we've seen a lot, and we've specifically seen it around Beth. And generally what we see is people going into a dark tunnel or passage, and the idea is that death is waiting for them in this dark tunnel or passage. And very often death takes the form of walkers. So let me remind you of a couple of times we've seen this. The first that comes to mind actually involved Maggie. It was in season 4B. Remember that Glenn was looking for her, so it was Glenn and Abraham and Rosita and Eugene, and they went into the dark tunnel, and what did they find? They found a lot of walkers. But the idea about behind the dark tunnel as well is that on the other side is the light, so you kind of have to walk through the territory of death, and then if you can come out on the other side, you live. And generally, I think there are people who die in the dark tunnel, but hopefully, our main characters don't. They come out on the other side. So we saw that in 4B that a lot of people had died, and then it looked like Glenn's group might die. Actually, it was just Glenn and Tara at that point, because Abraham and Rosita and them went around, and they came through the other side with Maggie and rescued Glenn and Tara. And that was when Maggie and Glenn were reunited, right? So there was that. Another one that comes to mind is actually at Grady. I've said this many times. I think it was in episode 7, so it wasn't Coda, but the episode before it, when Beth went to get drugs from Edward, or to ask him how she could help Carol, and they talk. When she walks out of his office, the hallway is a dark tunnel, right? It's very dark out there, and in the distance, at the end of the hallway, we see that there's a light on, and Beth literally walks into that dark tunnel, which I think was 100% intentional. They were symbolizing that she was about to go into the territory of death, because in the next episode she was going to be shot. But the fact that they had a light at the end is a very compelling, to me, symbol that she did survive and she did make it through the tunnel. We just haven't seen them confirm that for us yet, right? And you could even say that they did the dark tunnel thing at the end of the last Daryl Dixon season, because Daryl and Carol and, the people who were with them went into that underground passage, or it's an old train passage or something, whatever it was. And it very much was a dark tunnel, a dark passage, and a bunch of them died there. There was a lot of walkers, but Daryl and Carol survived and made it through, right? So this is a very common and potent symbol, and it was used in a very small way here. It was only for a couple of minutes, right? But Negan and Waylon go through, and once again, we have Negan making it through to the other side, to the light, and Waylon does not make it. And, I don't think Negan was sad about that. Like, it kind of made it seem like he had the opportunity to help him and didn't, but he wants Waylon gone so that, if they do run into anyone, he doesn't have to worry about Waylon killing anyone. All right, so where are we at? At the cafe community, Nevaeh is talking to the Colonel, and she says he was right to bring up New Babylon and, to offer it to them and offer them to be allies. And she clearly, like I said, they're really not going to leave this group alone if they can help it. They're not going to respect their request to be left out of it, because she wants to make this place like a way station for New Babylon where they can, bring their people when they're journeying to get more methane. So she's got all kinds of plans. Then back to Herschel, the girl who saved him in the grass and was watching him earlier shows up and looks at his drawing. Now, guys, this is this is something I didn't notice right away, and then I saw the subtitles, and it's really important. So he starts talking to her, it establishes that she can understand him. It says that he's been separated from his friends, and he's just kind of trying to make friends with her. And then Waylon comes out of the woods and stabs this girl in the leg. So Waylon actually survived the tunnel, but he was bitten several times, so we know he's not going to survive long term either way. But he stabs her in the leg, and she's hurt pretty bad, and then Negan stabs Waylon in the chest and takes him out and is standing there. We have this interesting thing that happens where Herschel fires a gun at Negan. It's the gun from Ginny's pack, but he misses. And, it's just, we kind of have Negan and Herschel coming face to face, and it was just kind of an interesting moment. But what was interesting that I was saying is that I looked at the subtitles. The girl who gets stabbed in the leg, her name is Joan. I don't think anyone says her name in the show, but in the subtitles, it said something like, Joan cries out in pain or something like that. And I was like, oh, okay, we have yet another Grady reference. This girl she was a minor character. She befriended Herschel. She was interested in his art. And she was part of the community before Herschel got there. She is part of the cafe community. And then she dies throughout the course of the episode. And that is exactly what Joan's role was at Grady, right? She was already part of the community. She and Beth weren't like really good friends or anything, but Beth saw her. Remember, she was singing, and Joan said, that's really nice. So they kind of were acquaintances and were kind of friends. I mean, they certainly weren't enemies or anything, but Joan dies throughout the course of the episode. So I thought that was interesting. No way that's not a Grady reference, guys. No way that's not a Grady reference. And especially because they don't actually really say her name, but they went out of their way to put it in the subtitles so that if we're looking closely enough, we'll know what her name is. So I'm just going to go back to what I always say, which is, why put... I mean, there's literally a million names they could use. If they're reusing a name on the show, there's a reason for it. And Joan was at Grady, so why make a Grady reference if it's no longer relevant, right? Really super interesting. That made me happy. That made me excited. All right, so... then we move to Maggie, and we see her take down a walker, just stab a walker that comes at her, and its heart is missing too, and she notices it. So they're starting to notice this and how weird it is, but then Herschel and Joan show up. He's helping her walk because she's hurt, and Negan isn't with them. So I was going, oh, he's not there. I thought him and Maggie were going to come face to face here, but they didn't. So they take her back to the community. That's when they learn that she's one of their people. And we have another flashback with Herschel and the Dama. He wakes up in the middle of the night. His door is still open, because remember, she left it open. He takes the fork from his dinner plate, right? And leaves his room. Even the fork from the dinner plate reminded me of season 2. When Beth went through her suicide arc and she was lying in bed, and remember, she stole the knife from the plate, and Lori came back in looking for it and realized she'd stolen it and said, give it to me. It just reminded me of that, because there's this plate sitting there with a utensil on it, and he grabs the fork, which clearly he's thinking he'll use that as a weapon if he needs to. It just reminded me of season 2. He goes out into the hallway, and instantly all these walkers come at him, which... Okay, this maybe Herschel should have been a little more suspicious of. I totally get that he's young and he's not understanding that the Dama is manipulating him, but why would if this is like a well-established place and they have walls and guards and, you know what I mean, they live here, why would there be walkers in the hallway? There's no reason for that. So I'm like, okay, Herschel, I get that you're a teenager, but you might want to be a little more suspicious about these things. Clearly it was a setup. The Dama comes and kills them and helps him up and asks if he's okay, and it's just another way for her to endear herself to him. And then we had actually another serious reference here, because he did stab one of the walkers with a fork in the eye. So as she's taking Herschel down the hall in the other direction, the camera, pans in to where there's an eye sticking out of this, there's a fork sticking out of this walker's eye, and that's a serious reference as well. So she takes him into a room with lots of pictures, and there's music playing, and he's really kind of starstruck by it. And then she closes the doors, and it turns out they're on an elevator, which is a little bit creepy, but also kind of interesting, right? Elevator shaft, guys. Elevator that Beth went down. We've seen this a lot as a symbol. And usually, I don't know, I'm not sure exactly how to articulate the interpretation for why he's going up rather than down. Like, we often think of anything that breaks the plane as, if you're going up, it might be like a heaven or paradise symbol. If you're going down, more like to the basement, it might be an underworld symbol. When Beth and Noah went down the elevator shaft, it was into this dark basement, which I think symbolized the same thing, that she was going to be walking through, quote unquote, the underworld. She was going to be in death's territory. But she did make it out every time. And so they're obviously not symbolizing quite the same thing here, because Herschel doesn't go down, he goes up, and he can see the entire city. So I'm really interested to see how this plays out, but it's a really interesting symbol. So the Dama gives him this whole speech about how their world has been destroyed, but that's okay, because now they get to build something new, and the world is a canvas for them. So she's using his own language, like the language of art, canvas, painting, drawing, building things, to get him to trust her and on her side. She says that he's different, that he's gifted. He doesn't see what is or was, but what could be. So she's praising him. Again, just more of the manipulation. Herschel gives Ginny her bag back because, they've made it back to the community. And Nevaeh's wants to do something. She says they are distracted. I don't even know if she was planning to leave, or it seemed more like she was planning to maybe take them down, like take control of the community or something. But for once, the colonel actually stands up to her and tells her to stand down. So thank heaven he finally did that. He really hasn't stood up to her much so far. Anyway, so she does stand down. And then they go into this ritual where Joan is clearly dying. There's not much they can do for her because her wound is too bad. I mean, it's right in her leg, and she's lost too much blood and all of that. So they all go through and her community and touch their forehead to hers, as a way of saying goodbye. And Herschel does the same thing, and he puts his drawing into her hand because she liked it, which I thought was sweet. And then they all start keening, like doing that grief moan together. It was, if you watch the episode Insider, it really was meant to be a very positive thing and to show that different cultures grieve in different ways, and this was their way of letting out their feelings rather than bottling them up, which I think is great, and I thought that was really, really cool. But at the same time, there was something that was quite disturbing about it, and you could tell that Maggie and the Colonel and some of the others were a little bit disturbed by it, and they were completely respectful of these people's, grief and religious beliefs and all of that. But it was like, at first, the keening started really low and sounded very sad, and then it got louder and louder, and I think that was part of what it made it more disturbing. And then the leader cut out Joan's heart, and so we finally understand why they keep seeing walkers without their hearts. It's just part of their death ceremony. They will cut out the heart, and then they actually don't bury their dead. They put their dead out with the walkers because they feel like in death their loved ones will protect them. So again, it's really interesting, and I think I think it's kind of sweet. I mean, even though on one hand it's kind of morbid, it's also kind of cool, But that was the answer to why so many of the walkers around there did not have hearts. Let's see. Then we move to the Croat. He's listening to music in his car, and Negan comes back. And, Negan says they couldn't find any of Maggie's group. It's a death trap. No way that they're alive. And then he tells him that Waylon died. You can tell the Croat is still having some doubts. He looks at him like, are you really telling the truth? But in the end, he accepts it and says that accidents happen. But I think this is it's another way that it's not going to be good for Negan, kind of like when he hesitated and didn't shoot the boat because he saw Herschel. We know the Croat is going to inform to the Dama, so even though he's telling Negan he accepts what he said, I don't know that he actually has. He may go back to the Dama and say something happened again, Negan did something, so I think Negan's in a lot of danger right now. Back at the cafe, they put Joan's heart out for the walkers to eat, and then she is put out with the walkers, like I said. Maggie talks to Herschel again, and she asks him, I asked before if the city had any pull on you, and you said no. Was that true? And she says, please just tell me the truth. I'm just trying to understand. And so he repeats the Dama's words about wanting to rebuild the world, and it's like, on the one hand, this is a really good scene. I mean, it's good that they're having this discussion because Maggie is genuinely asking him how he feels, and he's telling her. And this is probably the kind of thing they don't do very much. It's good for them to actually bond and, have him tell her his feelings and what's bothering him and what he's thinking about. But he also doesn't tell her everything about the Dama. It's not like he's like, oh, okay, so this is what happened. This is what she told me. This is what I was supposed to do. No, it's not that. So he's still holding a lot back. And then we kind of flash back to him drawing again when he's with the Dama. And we just hear her tell him that they must sacrifice to save the world. And there are things he'll have to do when he goes home. But we don't hear what she actually told him to do. So it's quite ominous. And, I'm sure what she told him to do was when they come back, he needs to follow, he needs to signal that they're coming, all of that. And so clearly he's working for her. So yeah, it was an interesting episode. Not tons of symbolism, but the ones that are there, like the Joan being the name and the elevator shaft and the dark passage, they're pretty potent, so even though there's not tons, what is there is really, really compelling and really important. And yeah, I just think we're going to get more into how Herschel is working against them. If they do follow the Chronicles of Narnia template, then at some point he'll come around, right? Edmund doesn't continue to work for the White Witch. He eventually comes over to the right side. And I do remember them talking about making Herschel a villain. And really, if it's like an Edmund-style villain, I don't really see Edmund as a villain. So I don't know if that was just the way they were describing it and they are going to follow the Edmund template, or if, you know, this part of it is following the Edmund template, but in the end they'll make him way more evil than Edmund was. I honestly don't know. But it's going to be interesting to see. So I enjoyed the episode. Let me know if you guys enjoyed it, and I will be back in a few days with some new Ask videos, okay? Talk to you soon.